Welcome to the BLI podcast. I'm Wendy Wollner. We have a very special episode today with an incredible guest. You're going to hear some real secrets about the Oval Office. And most importantly, I think you're going to hear about leadership and communication, which are two foundations for what we need in our lives today, whether it be as a parent or whether it be as a manager or leader in an organization. So pick one of those moments out and we'd love to hear from you. So share it. Enjoy the conversation and be sure to subscribe to us wherever you will listen to podcasts. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Wendy Wollner, and I'm thrilled to be here as your host for today's webinar. This promises to be an insightful and inspiring conversation. As the CEO of BLI, I've had the privilege of working at the intersection of communications, leadership, and education. We focus on building connections that drive impact. Whether it's helping teams navigate the workplace, all the challenges of mental wellness, and of course, using artificial intelligence in today's world, we help shape the future. But my passion really lies in empowering individuals and organizations to thrive. It is an honor to introduce Terry. Terry is someone who has had a profound impact on the art of storytelling at the highest levels of leadership. As a former senior speechwriter for President Barack Obama, Terry spent years crafting words that not only moved hearts, but also shaped history. From major policy announcements to personal tributes, his work has resonated with the audiences all across the board. Terry's ability to distill very complicated ideas into powerful, relatable narratives is extraordinary. Beyond the Oval Office, he is a trusted advisor to many leaders in businesses, in government, in hospitals, and schools. He has helped them find their voice and tell their story. Today, we're going to get a really cool behind-the-scenes look at how he approaches his craft, his challenges that he's faced, and the lessons we can all take away from his incredible career. Without any further ado, it is beyond an honor to introduce Terry.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you to you and everybody at Balancing Life's Issues for the invitation, the opportunity to be here. And life can be beautiful. Life and work can be beautiful. Life and work can also be challenging. And so I know thank you for helping guide so many people through the moments of beauty, but also the moments of challenge. What I want to do basically, I know we have about a 60-minute period set aside, but I'm happy to stay on longer if there are enough questions, if the discussion is going well and people want to stay. So we can do this up to 90 minutes if folks want to stay on. So I thought what I'd do is just start with a brief presentation about my work at the White House, the book that I worked on, why I wrote it, and then really open it up for questions and have a great discussion. I'm happy to discuss and talk about anything you want to talk about. So there you go.
And you'll see the book many times throughout the
all right
together.
So first of all, I just want to say, Wendy and I have never met, but she did reach out through LinkedIn, and I have come to absolutely love LinkedIn. I feel like it's one of the last nice places on the internet. I suspect a lot of us on the webinar today are already connected, which I'm thrilled to be connected with you. If we're not, please reach out. Please send me an invite. I'd love to be connected. I try to use LinkedIn every day to share lessons in communications and public speaking, do's and don'ts, tips and strategies. And so I love it. It's a supportive place. So if you're looking to improve, I'd love to be connected with you. Please send me an invitation. Secondly, I just want to thank you. A lot of you already have the book, and it's been a wonderful experience. I've never written a book before. We can talk about what that's like if you want. And it's been just such a wonderful community of support, and I'm incredibly grateful to those of you who've already supported, who came out for the book tour. You made it a national bestseller, which was pretty cool. And I'm glad that more people are finding out about it as the weeks and months go by. So one of the things I just want to say up front, too, is feel free to take screenshots and share any part of this presentation that resonates with you. One of the things I love, people are always taking screenshots and sharing what they learned during the webinar or during the book. You're more than welcome. None of this is proprietary. So if any of it appeals to you, feel free to share it. Feel free to tag me. Again, I do all my stuff on LinkedIn. I kind of stay away from some of the other platforms, which are just kind of nasty and mean. So yeah, feel free again to share any of what you're about to see. So just a little bit about me. One of the questions I often get is, how do you become a presidential speechwriter in the first place? It's a little bit an odd, unusual profession. So how I got here. I've been doing this now for almost 30 years. And I've been a speechwriter and a communications advisor to leaders in government, business, politics, entertainment, philanthropy, advocacy. And for 8 years, I was a speechwriter for President Obama as a foreign policy speechwriter, and in the second term as the deputy director of speechwriting. So making sure that helping to make sure that a whole team of us stayed on message, both in the White House and across the administration. How did I get my start? I guess you could say I got my start in the fourth grade. I grew up in Massachusetts, down on Cape Cod, a few towns over from Hyannisport. So the Kennedys were always in the news. I was fascinated with government and politics. And so for a book report, I read a book about John F. Kennedy. And we had to dress up as the person we read about. So this is me obviously dressed as John F. Kennedy. So I think I was in the fourth grade. I came up with something ingenious like ask not what your classroom can do for you, ask what you can do for your classroom. So not quite a great start to speechwriting, but I was on my way. I wanted to be where the center of it all. I came to Washington, D.C., to American University. My senior year, I got an incredible opportunity to be an intern at the White House. And as an intern, I don't think I ever met the president. This is me on the far left, top left corner. It's about as close as I ever got to the president. But I was assigned to the speechwriter's office, specifically the foreign policy speechwriter's office. And as you all know, being an intern, you do a lot of grunt work, but every once in a while, they let me take a crack at something. And one time when I was 22 years old, a senior in college, I got to help draft some brief remarks for the President of the United States on his visit to Ukraine. And so again, these are not historic remarks. I think basically the real speechwriters are busy, so why not let the intern take a crack at something? I'm sure nobody remembers these remarks because they were not historic or prestigious. It was, as you can see, remarks to U.S. Embassy staff in the gymnasium. So none of this largely forgotten to history, but it meant the world to me to be able to help a president, when I was 22 years old, to help a president. And I happen to be Ukrainian American, so to be able to help a president communicate to the people of Ukraine meant the world to me. And it sort of lit a spark in me that maybe this is something I could do myself. A few years later, I got my first real speechwriting job as a speechwriter, a junior speechwriter for our Secretary of Defense. I show this picture because, in the movies and Top Gun, everyone puts on the gear. Everyone looks handsome and sexy. This is what you really look like when you put the gear on. You're neither handsome nor sexy. But it was an incredible opportunity to really, help the Secretary of Defense communicate with our troops and military families all over the world. I like to point out who the Secretary of Defense was at the time. Some of you may know who this is. William Cohen. He was a former senator from Maine, a Republican. And he did something that's all too rare in American politics, but something that we need more of, which is he crossed the aisle, put country before party, crossed the aisle, served in the administration of the other party. And so I share this picture, especially with a lot of young people, because this is me. I happen to be a Democrat. So this is me as a young Democrat with my boss, who's a Republican, who's serving his president, who's a Democrat. And to me, that's how national security should work. That's how government should work. That's how public service should work. And I hope that's something and that's one of the lessons I share in the book that I learned from William Cohen that I hope people, especially young people, can get back to. This is the spirit of service that we need now more than ever. A few years later, I was a volunteer speechwriter at the 2004 Democratic Convention in Boston. Rumor went around that the keynote speaker was pretty good. Some folks had heard him in practice sessions, so we made sure we were out there on the convention floor. Out walks this person we had never heard of before, state senator from Illinois named Barack Hussein Obama. And 16, 17 minutes later, people were talking about him as a future president. And I point this out again. I'm sure whether you like the guy or don't like the guy, like his policies or hate his policies, I share this because, if you can get up and give a presentation and 16, 17 minutes later, change the way your audience sees you or your organization or what your mission is, that's a pretty powerful presentation. Again, whatever our politics, I'd like to think that's something we can learn from. So I talk about that quite a bit in the book. 4 years later, I was at the convention again. When that keynote speaker became the nominee, I got to know his speechwriters over that week. And when he won, they invited me to join their team. So 14 years after being an intern for the presidential foreign policy speechwriters, I became a presidential foreign policy speechwriter myself. So for those of you with kids, maybe for those of you who are a little younger, maybe you're frustrated that things aren't moving as fast as you want at work. It took me 14 years to go from being the intern to the dream job. It's put in the work, stay the course, be good at what you do. It will happen eventually. Very quick story. This is our speechwriting team at the end of the administration, president and the first lady speechwriting team. A quick story about what he's doing there. We all have verbal tics. I do, you do. President Obama did. One of his tics was rejecting notions. We never write this into the speech, but he'd give a speech and he always said, we need to reject the notion that the economy can't work for everyone. We need to reject the notion that climate change can't be solved. So as a gag gift for his birthday, someone went through in our office 8 years of speeches to find all the notions he had rejected. We put him on a poster board. And as you look really close there, it says all the president's notions. So we thought it was hysterical. He kind of chuckled. But we were very fortunate to be part of an incredible team with an incredible boss. Again, politics aside, he always treated us with respect and dignity, and I hope you have that in your workplace as well. Over those years, 8 years, we wrote over 3,000 speeches. Every night we send them up in a folder like this. Every morning they come back with edits like this. Over the course of those 8 years, I was very fortunate to join the president on visit. I was a foreign policy speechwriter, so I got to go with him around the world to more than 40 countries. And, it is true. Germans speak differently than French. Americans speak differently than Canadians. Not just the language, but the style. And I acknowledge that. But I also, believe that there's some fundamental ways that we can connect with each other as human beings. And I saw that as President Obama traveled the world and connected with audiences across all sorts of cultures and demographics. And so that's one of the reasons I believe so deeply in the lessons that I share in the book, because I've seen them work all over the world. Traveling with the president can be a little scary sometimes. This is a real incident. Athens, Greece. The audience of thousands of people were in their seats, ready for the speech. The president was backstage, ready to give the speech. And the speech was trapped on my laptop with no Wi-Fi. And I'm literally on my hands and knees outside, with very, very grateful to an IT guy trying to help me save the speech and save my job. So that look is the look of a speechwriter. Pretty sure I'm about to lose my job. I think the only reason I didn't lose my job at that moment was because we were only a few weeks from the end of administration. I don't think it was worth the paperwork to fire me. Every time we got edits from the president, it was a learning experience. We got edits from him all time of day. Now, in this case, obviously I'm not dressed appropriately. I had been up all night working on a speech. The word came, the president had edits to his first speech of the day. I begged them not to send me in. I told them I wasn't dressed appropriately, but when the president has edits, you get the edits. And there's always a White House photographer to capture you in your least professional moments. So sometimes the president liked to sit right next to us while we made the edits. This is right outside the Oval Office. I guess in this particular case, there was no time to run back to my desk and do it myself. So we grabbed we stole someone's computer, started making the edits. He'd like to sit there sometimes and just say, "Are we done yet?" "No, sir, we're not done yet." 30 seconds would go by. "Are we done yet?" "No, sir, we're still not done yet." I always wanted to say, "We'd be done if you stop asking if we're done yet." But, these are things you don't say to a president. You think them, but you don't say them. None of us like it when our boss stands over our shoulders and tells us how to do our job. It happens at the White House, too. Imagine that, the leader of the free world, literally breathing down your neck, so to speak. It happened a lot. It happened more than once. And I have to say, what I'm about to show you is not one of my finest moments, but sometimes he would, listen, if we weren't getting it right, making the edit correctly, moving fast enough, he'd just kick us out, sit down and type it himself. So again, not my greatest moment as a speechwriter, but as a citizen, I kind of like this idea, a leader who cares enough about the words they use to do it themselves and to put in the thought and the effort. And I hope that's something that all of us can do. That's one of the lessons I share in the book about the work and the time we put in before we ever open our mouth. How's that? How's that for a concept? Think before we speak. But every edit we got from him was a lesson. This is kind of a light edit, just a few words here and there. Sometimes his edits were a little more significant. It would take us hours sometimes to figure out what he was doing with his many edits. And then sometimes if he felt we just kind of missed a really big idea overnight, he would break out the yellow legal pad and just write the speech himself. Now, he didn't do this all the time. Thank God. He had other responsibilities. But again, I think I share this because this is, one of the lessons of the book is don't wing it. Think it out, write it out. Plan it out. Be deliberate. Be thoughtful about what you want to say, no matter what the situation. And that's one of the great lessons. So I put all these experiences and in a book, which is Say It Well. And for those of you who have it, I hope you're enjoying it. I wrote this book for several reasons. One is public speaking is hard. It's hard to keep your audience engaged, even when you're president of the United States. I always feel bad for this little kid. They probably woke him up at 4 a.m, put him in a suit, put him on a bus, made him sit at the White House for hours, and then he had to listen to the president of the United States. I mean, poor kid, he's out. No way. So it's hard to keep our audiences engaged, even if you're president of the United States. One of the things that I'm thrilled about this book is that with his permission, I am sharing in this book a lot of the conversations that we had at the White House in the Oval Office as we worked on speeches together, because I learned a ton from him every single day. I want you to learn from him as well. And so as you read this book, I hope that you're not just feel like you're having a conversation with me and my fellow speechwriters. I hope you feel like you're having a conversation with Barack Obama, President of the United States, about why he communicated the way he did, the mistakes he made, how he got better, what he was trying to do, and how we can use these lessons in our own life. One of the stories that I'm thrilled to be able to share is back from that 2004 speech, that first time that so many of us ever heard of him or heard him speak. He seemed perfect. He seemed flawless. And a lot of people say, wow, what a naturally gifted speaker. And that phrase always bothered me, because I don't believe anyone's naturally gifted at anything. It only works when we practice. And I know this because he told me a story once that I share in the book. He was a young man in his early 20s in Chicago as a community organizer. He was giving a speech one day. He hadn't practiced. He didn't write it down. He said he felt a little cocky. He got nervous. He started stammering. He froze up. He totally lost his train of thought. He said he felt stupid and embarrassed. This is Barack Obama. So much for the naturally gifted speaker. It happens to all of us. I'm sure a lot of us feel like we've been there. I include this story because I want people to know that even someone like Barack Obama had struggles at times giving a speech, and that's important for all of us to know. Well, I had never heard that story. I share it in the book. My next question, of course, was, well, sir, how did you go from that 20-year-old who struggled to speak at times to that 42-year-old who gave a speech for the ages? And he looked at me kind of bemused at one point, and he said, I practiced. And, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, right? But we forget. And so he told me the story of all the different ways that he practiced to get better. And I share those in the book because they're things that we can do in our own lives as well. Very quickly, before we get to questions, I just want to share with you 4 little lessons from the book, 4 ways you can say it well. And one of the things that I'm thrilled about this book is it's not just what I learned from a president of the United States. Presidents have teams of speechwriters. I was one of them. We don't. You don't. I don't. And so I realize it's a little bit of a leap to say, well, here's what Barack Obama did. You can do it too. That's too much. So in every chapter of the book, there are stories of just real folks all over the country and around the world who've stood up and given amazing speeches, amazing presentations, often without the help of a professional speechwriter, and often doing the same exact thing Barack Obama was doing. So I want you to see in every chapter, you're going to see a story about how Barack Obama did it, how this regular person did it, and how you can do it too. And so one of the first person I want to introduce to you is Braden Harrington, 13-year-old kid from New Hampshire. He was invited in 2020 to speak at one of the political conventions, the Democratic convention. Can you imagine being invited to speak at a national political convention, on television in front of millions of people? We'd all be terrified. Well, he was too, and he had an added challenge. He has a speech impediment. He has a stutter. Can you imagine the fear, the anxiety that went into this? So he decided to try to do it, but one day as he practiced, as he got ready, he broke down in tears. The pressure was too much. He kept stuttering. He couldn't stop stuttering. He was nervous about stuttering on national television. His mother said something beautiful to him. She said, Braden, your imperfections are your gifts. Share your gifts with the world. And with that, he found the courage to kind of power through. And from his own bedroom, because this was during COVID, he spoke for 2 minutes on national television to millions of people. And he stuttered the whole time through, not a lot of it. Imagine that. What courage, what bravery. And he did it not by trying to avoid his imperfections, the things he struggled with. He embraced them. He leaned into them. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. There are surely all things that maybe we're insecure about, that we don't like about ourselves. We're worried if we stand up, we're going to get judged. I think one of the great, lessons that Braden teaches, we have to our imperfections are a gift. And when we share those gifts with our audience, that's how you form a human connection. And, great story. He did that. He's gone on to speak he's become somewhat of a public speaker himself. He's spoken on national news and he speaks to groups. He wants to become a speech pathologist to help other children and young people work through and become better speakers. And he's even written a book. He even wrote a children's book for other kids called Braden Speak Up. So if you all know anyone, but if you're not going to buy Say It Well, buy Braden Speaks Up. How about that? Because someone who struggles, a kid with a speech impediment or stutter, this book will inspire them. Another lesson from the book is about how to use humor. This is Xander Moritz. He was a few years ago, he was a class president down in his high school in Florida. So he's going to give the commencement address, as all class presidents do. And he also happens to be gay. And this was right around the time that Florida was passing that new law that came about how to talk about sexuality and gender in the classroom. A lot of confusion, a lot of fear. Critics called it the Don't Say Gay law. So his principal was very nervous that he was going to get up and give a very political speech and say the very thing that the state law said you shouldn't say. And he was really torn. He became something of a media spectacle and sensation. There were people all over the country urging him to speak up. And the principal told him, if you do this, we're going to cut your mic. And so he was torn. He wanted to be true to himself, as we all should as speakers. He wanted to be authentic. But he also, to his credit, very mature young man, he told me, I didn't want to ruin the day for everybody else. All my classmates had worked towards this day. So how could he honor himself and be true to himself, but also not cause a spectacle? He did something genius. He was giving his speech like any class president would, talking about all the things they had achieved and done together. And then there was a point in his speech when he said, I couldn't be here today without acknowledging a part of myself that you all know about. And a hush fell over the room. This is exactly what the principal had told him not to do. And he said, there's a part of me that I cannot deny, as all of you know. And he took off his hat. He said, I have curly hair. And everyone burst out laughing. And for the rest of his speech, he talked about what it was like to be a kid with curly hair in Florida. And not just because of the humidity, but what it was like to have teachers who support students with curly hair, what it's like to find a community of other kids with curly hair, and what it's like when we tell kids with curly hair that they shouldn't be proud of their curly hair or should hide their curly hair. It was hysterical, but it was beautiful. And I share that story because humor at its best is when we use humor to make a point and to connect with our audience. And he did that beautifully. And that speech also went viral. And he became one of the country's leading advocates for social justice. And he's still out there doing the work every day. So that's one of the lessons I share in the book as well. Big theme of the book is about how we connect with one another around values. And after the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, one of the first states in the country to put the question to a popular vote was Kansas. Obviously, we all know Kansas is a very conservative state. One of the advocates that I introduce you to in the book on the side of reproductive freedom was a woman named Ashley All. And she obviously believes passionately in her cause, but she also recognized that she's in Kansas. And so she and her fellow advocates had to think deeply about how they talk about an issue that can be divisive and around which reasonable people can have different opinions. I want to state that. I'm not here today to push a particular agenda. I share this story because it's an example of an issue that good people of good faith can have profoundly different opinions on. And so, but they were going to put it to a vote, and she had a decision to make. And what did she decide to do? Number one, she decided they were not going to demonize anyone or dehumanize anyone because they disagreed with them. They weren't going to condemn anyone because they had a different opinion than themselves. What they did do was they were smart, and they embraced a lot of the language that appealed to people all across Kansas, not just liberals or moderates, but conservatives too. They framed their issue around language and values that resonated with a lot of people in Kansas. And to the surprise of people all over the country, they shocked the country and the world by Kansas, one of the most conservative states in the country, voting pretty solidly to protect a woman's right to control her own body. And now, however you feel about that particular issue, I include that story because I just love what Ashley says. about this whole issue, and says, we can't just yell at people and demand that they agree with us. It doesn't work. It turns people off. Whatever the issue, we have to use language that brings people together around common ideals and values. It's the only way we'll make progress. And so that's a huge lesson of the book, is even as we disagree, even as we may, be passionate about our issues, how can we communicate in ways that don't turn people off, that don't condemn people simply because they disagree with us, that we don't dehumanize people and we don't demonize people? And that's a major theme of the book, and I'm thrilled to be able to share that story as well. And then the final lesson, just leave you with, this is Donovan Livingston. He was a graduate student at Harvard School of Education. He's invited to give his commencement speech at graduation. He also happens to be a hip hop artist. And so he decided to turn his entire speech into a hip hop poem. If you get 5 minutes today after this Zoom, please enter Donovan Livingston in Google and just enjoy the next 5 minutes, because it is one of the most remarkable speeches I have ever seen in my life. The content, the delivery, everything about it. It's participatory. He forges a deep, deep connection with his audience, and that's something we can all do. It's a powerful speech about equity and equality in education. And he uses body language. He brings his audience involved. There's cheering. They're clapping along. They're with him. And I include that story in part because he told me something beautiful. He said, when I spoke, it wasn't just me up there. It was all of us. I wasn't pouring my words in, to an empty vessel. I was pouring my ideas back to the audience, and they were pouring them back to me. It was a connection bigger than me, a connection bigger than me, like we were all in something together. I think that's one of the great things we can do as speakers, as leaders, is you want to make sure your audience feels like they're part of something bigger than themselves, that they're connected to one another. And these are just 4 of the lessons that I share in the book, and 4 of the people that I introduce you to. So, I should say, during the book tour, we had a wonderful event at the Kennedy Center, JFK Library in Boston, where we brought all of these 4 amazing folks together. We had Braden, Xander, Ashley, Donovan joining us on the stage for an incredible conversation. It's online. If you Google JFK Library, Say It Well, it's a presentation, and it's just everything about the spirit of this book is captured in that moment. So I hope you get it. If you want more, that you can enjoy that. And again, one of the final lessons share with you is, this is one of my favorite quotes from the president. Everybody has a sacred story. I think as communicators, as leaders, as colleagues, as coworkers, when we share our story with the people around us who we love and admire, that's when we can connect. That's when we can lead. That's when we're the best versions of ourselves. I hope that's one of the lessons you take away from the book. And again, thank you so much for those of you who've already bought it. I hope for those of you who choose to get it, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it useful in your life and work. Again, I'm on LinkedIn. Please connect. Please send me an invite. I'll accept it today. Try to share public speaking tips every single day. And again, if you enjoyed any of this presentation, feel free to share any of it, all of it, however you want to do it. Tag me. I'd love to kind of continue the conversation and continue learning together. So thank you so much. And I'll just stop it there. I think I'm going to do this. Stop sharing my screen, and happy to take. Now, I know I can't see any of you.
No.
You can see me, and Wendy and her team are kind of sifting through the questions, and they're going to consolidate and try to answer as many of them as I can. And we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
But ask anything. I'm an open book, literally.
So yeah, let me just validate that is how Terry and I met on LinkedIn. I really just want to add, it's not just that he has an amazing story with an incredibly inspirational background and so generous to sharing it. I just want to put out there, he's a super nice guy. And it's really very refreshing and incredibly important in this day and age, the connection and the willingness. And I think many of you know, I've been giving speeches for 27 years, and I learned more in the book. I was sharing that I wrote like all different pages, but I think for today, I'm really going to encourage you to read the book as many times as I did and my mom did. So I thought that I would give you all a chance. You're going to send off the questions. We're going to get as to many as we can. We'll try to lump them together. You did get a lot of love. You got a lot of hearts and a lot of clapping during your presentation. So you know that. You got a few shout outs to calling you genius and things you did.
Oh,
So I want to make sure you get that. But there's a few people that'd like to know if you've ever tried stand-up comedian work.
Oh my God. No.
And I think they really want to know if you think there's a value in speakers being part of that stand-up committee, what your opinion on that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, I talked about Xander and how he used humor, and I try to use humor. I don't try to use humor. I just try to be honest and try to, I think so often I love LinkedIn. One of the things I don't like about LinkedIn is that every day, all day, it's humbled and honored to announce that I'm recipient of this award, which I might do later today. But uh, uh, I think people, when you acknowledge your mistakes, you acknowledge your imperfections. Those are often funny moments. You know, People often ask me, what's more realistic what's a more realistic depiction of the White House, West Wing or Veep? And I say the answer is that my answer is actually Veep, because not because we're all totally incompetent, but because we are all in over our head. Everybody wants to be there. Everybody's worked really hard to be there, but working in the White House is just insane. And every single day you're responding to just unbelievable situations in the country and around the world. And no matter how well you think you're prepared, you're never fully prepared. So you're always kind of scrambling. But yeah, there's a lot of funny, I guess we all know what's funny. You don't have to go to, I don't think, take a comedy. I've never taken any instruction in comedy or humor or stand up or anything like that. But, we're all sitting around the dinner table and we know what makes our friends and our colleagues laugh. So tell those stories. And you know what stories don't. It may be funny to you, but then you realize no one's laughing and it's just crickets. Don't tell that story.
Estimate, yeah.
Kind of use your friends and family and colleagues as your own little comedy club and test out what works.
Yep, I'm a big believer in testing them out. So as you know, we have a global audience. So the question from Ireland is saying, how do you decide on your opening line and your closing line?
Right. So the book is structured the way I think a great presentation can be structured. That it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there are certain things you need to do in the beginning, in the middle, and the end that are different. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that opening line and the closing line. I think they're probably the two most important lines of your presentation. And even if you're not going to read a script word for word, I encourage you to, on a piece of paper, always write out your opening line and your closing line. So no matter where you go and weave and do, you have a clear, impactful opening line and a memorable closing line. And to me, the opening line is your first and best chance to connect emotionally with your audience. So smile. It is the simplest. I mean, don't smile at like a eulogy or after a tragedy. That's like really creepy and weird. But 99% of the time, a smile is a perfect way to start a presentation. And gratitude, thanking the people who have brought you there and why they brought you there, and honoring the people you have. So I know a lot of people say like, oh, don't do acknowledgments. Don't ever do acknowledgments. Are you kidding me? Now, I don't favor doing long lists of boring acknowledgments. All you do is list people. That's awful. But always thank the people who brought you there. Always thank them for their time. Honor them. That's where you get that human connection. But one of the simplest ways to start a presentation is an enthusiastic, meaningful smile and say hello. It is great to be with you today. Thank you so much for letting me be with you. Gratitude.
Love that. All right, wait, Terry, we got to move on. You got a lot here. You described speechwriting as a creative process with President Obama. But how would you characterize your role, your specific role in crafting those speeches? And we're going to do this, Terry. I'm going to keep it a list so we get some more questions. How's that sound?
That's a very polite way. You're so I will be. I will do what I say.
That message well.
Yes, to be concise. You read the book, and I need to actualize it. Yeah, a lot of big misconceptions about speech writing is that we're putting words in somebody else's mouth. That's not how it works at all. Our job is to listen to everything they say, write, say in interviews, and to, as best we can, absorb their voice, absorb their way of thinking, and give that back to them. to give them the script and the speech that they would write for themselves if only they had time to do it. It's not my words. It's not what I think. It's not what I think should be the policy. I'm there to serve someone else, in that case, the president. And so, and the best compliment you can get as a speechwriter is when someone looks at your speech and goes, well, that sounds like me.
Wow. Okay. So that actually is the next question. We have several people who are on that's their job, their corporate communications in their world. And what they're asking you is, do you believe that person they're writing for, their executive, should be involved in the process?
Oh my gosh, they have to be. Absolutely. One of the biggest mistakes that I think a lot, and you can tell your CEOs and your executives that I said this. One of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is they think that speechwriters and comms teams are mind readers, right? They say, this is why I hired you. Go do your magic. I hate that phrase. Go do your magic. They want a perfect speech back. Well, that's not how it works. It has to be a mind meld. It's a collaboration. These speechwriters are not mind readers. And I showed you that picture of us in the Oval Office with Barack Obama. On the really big speeches, he took the time to meet with us a week or two before to give us his thoughts, to share it on his mind so that we knew what direction to go in. And so if the President of the United States could make time for his communications team and speechwriters, any executive can make time. It's really important. And over and over again, I have people come to me and say, I'm not happy with my speechwriting or comms team. And my first question is, how often do you meet with them? Do they know what you want? They can't know what you want unless you tell them.
And I want to just draw one really important point that Terry does in his book. From time to time, he'll do a little bubble about why AI won't work.
Right.
So I'm going to leave it there because I really want this to be an engaging conversation and I want you to read the book. But I think it's really important to say that there are all these pop-ups that are like, and this is why you don't do that. So this person's saying, what is the difference between selling people, inspiring people, and I'm going to add another trajectory, delivering really difficult, just bad news? So 3 different ideas, right? Sometimes you sell, sometimes you inspire, and sometimes you just have to deliver bad news. What's the difference in the process of writing that speech?
I mean, I guess with selling, the call to action is really specific and tangible. Like your pitch needs to end with a very clear message of what you want them to do. You want them to go out and buy your service, sign up for your service, buy your product, and you're hitting that over and over again so that by the time you're done speaking, they want to buy your product. It's not vague. It's not 30,000 feet. It's very specific. You want them to go online, wear it, whatever, and go to the store and buy your product immediately. So a very clear. With a speech that's meant, more inspirational, I think that's more about the feeling. That's about the feeling that's left with the audience. And I thought you all probably have speeches that you could think of that have inspired you. You may have done something immediately after that speech. You may have signed up to vote. You may have signed up to volunteer or to donate. So oftentimes the inspirational speech, should still have a concrete deliverable at the end of it. But also what you hope for is that if you've really inspired somebody, it's something they carry with them for days, weeks, months, years. It's something that they go back to in difficult times to lift them up, to give them hope, to help them push through. So whereas maybe a sell is a concrete action that you do once or twice, buy the product, become a customer, I feel like inspiring someone, it's more of the feeling. And then as far as the bad news, I get this a lot. I have a session I teach speech writing. I have a whole class on crisis communications. I think number one, tell the truth. Everyone can see what's happening in front of their eyes. So many leaders, politics, business, nonprofits, they try to, use euphemisms or deny what's happening. Well, that's a separate thing. Deny what's happening. The second thing is, don't use euphemisms. If you have to lay people off, don't talk about restructuring and rebalancing. And people have gotten the worst news of their life. Just be honest. And I wish more leaders would talk to their people and with those messages that they sent out. I wish they would be written and more as if the CEO was looking at you in the hallway and comforting you as you just found out you lost your job, because that's the reality. And then finally, just don't ignore the elephant in the room. everyone
Well,
knows
that's
what
a
the
good one for the next question.
yeah,
So
okay.
first, let me state our my work here at BLI from the beginning has always been to talk about what was then called edgy, right? So I started my career. Where I was very lucky. My parents, Terry, let me go work in Washington for the President's Commission on the Holocaust under President Carter. They let me leave high school, which I now can't believe as a parent because I don't know if I would. But so the next question is a tough one, and Terry has agreed that there were no off-limit questions. So this is a person who is saying that they work in crisis communication, especially with the airline industry. And so for a moment, let's just all acknowledge what a tragedy and horrific morning and night last night was. But apparently, which I did not watch, President Trump's remark at the news conference where he blamed last night helicopters mid-air collision on the DEI initiatives. How would you feel about that speech?
So one of the first lessons that I teach in crisis communications is that wait for the facts. The first reports are usually wrong. I wrote a lot of speeches for President Obama after terrorist attacks, mass shootings, tragedies of all kinds, and almost always the first reports were either inaccurate or incomplete. And so we just don't know. And so I think one of the hallmarks of leadership is waiting for the facts, not rushing to judgment, and not pointing fingers until you have the facts. So that would be one of my recommendations to everybody, which is time and again we've seen leaders have to walk back statements because they were wrong. But we know that first reports are often incomplete or inaccurate. So just be patient and stick to what you know and acknowledge that there's a lot you don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that because I live in Arlington, Virginia. The airport's a few miles away, and it's unbelievable. And so, yeah. But
And I think it's interesting just to add one of the things that I've learned in delivering speeches is to be so mindful of who's in the audience, right? I mean, I'm always conscious of were they affected by any tragedy? I mean, to me, September 11th was like yesterday. So it's always thinking about who's in the audience, which has a direct connection to something going on. Somebody would like to know, have you ever experienced writer's block? And if you do, what do you do to overcome it?
yeah, I tell this story in the book. I had the first and thankfully only panic attack of my life while working at the White House. I was working on a speech for the president. He was going to speak to the Parliament of India. And I was trucking along. I'd been a speechwriter for more than a decade. I knew what the job was. I knew how to write a speech. And then someone in the White House, I guess thinking they were funny, said, "Hey, good luck with that speech. Just remember, only 1 billion Indians will be watching." And oh my God, I like just kind of lost it. 1 billion people. I mean, how do you write a speech for 1 billion people? How do you make 1 billion people inspire? And I just got so caught up in it, and I froze. And I did the classic thing. Instead of writing, I just researched and researched and researched. Oh, if I research more, and getting closer and closer and closer. And I came home and I just started shaking on my couch. I had a panic attack. I had no idea what was happening. It had never happened to me before. Thankfully, my wife helped me get through it. One of the things that I realized, I think, with writer's block is, if any of you have ever had it, usually we're not saying, "Oh, I can't write. I can't write." It's usually that voice in our head saying, "You're in over your head. You shouldn't be here. You're out of your league. What were you doing? Why did you think you could handle this job? Clearly you can't." All just this self-loathing, right? It's this, you feel inadequate to the task. And so I think that's really what's going on. Because at any given moment, someone says, "Hey, write out a poem or copy a poem." We can write. You can write anything you want, but you don't think you're up to that particular task. So a big part of the book, actually, the first section of the book is about dealing with those sense of insecurities and that feeling of inadequacy that so many of us have in our professional settings. That I think that's the main reason most people have anxiety around public speaking. It's right. We're gonna get up, and they're gonna see through the veneer. They're gonna see how inadequate we are. We're gonna make a mistake. They're gonna judge us. They're gonna kick us out of the tribe. And there's
And
nothing
whole imposter
scarier than
syndrome, Terry.
right. So
We want to know a little. There's a little bit here behind the scenes. So there's a few questions about, come on, cough up and tell us what was really President Obama like right before a speech?
so right before a speech, he could be a real pain, actually. So we'd work on a speech for days, weeks, months, whatever, and we'd be backstage before the speech. Maybe there'd be, they call it the green room. It's where like somebody sits, and there's he's sipping his his tea for his throat, so he has a nice soothing throat. He's chit-chatting with the host, but maybe he has 10, 15, 20 minutes to kill. And he would do something we would absolutely hate. He said, let's see if we can tighten up this speech a little bit. And we're thinking, what? Like, the speech was done. Speech is great. He's like, hey, we have 10 minutes. Let's see if we can trim it a bit. And so he would start editing very casually. I mean, this is like 15, 10 minutes before the speech, casually editing, handing us the page. We will run it to the teleprompter, run back. I mean, but it drove me insane. It was so nerve wracking to be messing around with the speech moments before he goes out. But in a way, he was teaching us because he was teaching us to be, if you have 10 minutes, why not make the speech better? It was
I really love that.
An exercise and shaving words off, really forcing us to think about what's nice to say and what's necessary to say. And so, he would do that all the time. I always used to think he was hazing us. It was just so, I was like, why are you doing this to us? This is so mean. The speech was fine the way it was, but he was teaching. He was always trying to make it better. And that's one of the lessons I share in the book, is different ways that you can keep working to make your speech better, even in the final hours.
I love that 10-minute. First of all, people are asking, are you sure your book is available specifically in Nairobi, Kenya?
I confess I do not know. I know that it is available in about more than 50 countries. If you go to my website, Global Voices, or if you search, if you search "Say It Well, Terry Szuplat," it'll take you to my website, Global Voices, and there's a page for Just Say It Well, and there's a link for how you can order it internationally, and that should tell you whether you can get it either through Amazon or some other way through whether Kenya is one of the 50 countries. I think it is.
So if we were to hire you today in the most difficult of challenging divided times,
mm-hmm.
The first part of the question is, do you believe a speech could unite this country? And what would be 2 or 3 key points into it? And there's no pressure on that question, Terry.
You're right. I don't believe there's any one speech that can heal the intensity and the divisions that have kind of gripped us for many years now. I do think that in a moment of pain or tragedy or triumph, that a speech could certainly appeal to a cross section of people. I think it starts with leaders who want to truly unite the country. And not simply speak to their base or the people who vote for them. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have is so many leaders today in the political realm speak only to those who they believe support them. And it's very easy to do that, but that's not how you unite people.
I think that if you don't mind, just stay there for a minute, because I'll be a little self-serving here. So at Balancing Life's Issues, we have to deliver our speeches. We do many, many thousands to a very divided audience. And so what I hear you say is that we have to deliver speeches to everyone in that group.
Yeah. And that's sort of going back to the Ashley All story from Kansas, right? So, I told you what she believes. I told you what her position on a very contentious issue in America. She could have gone out there and just demonized and condemned people who disagree with her and portray them in the worst light. She didn't. She recognized that there are good people that disagree profoundly on big issues. And so she tried as best she could to communicate to the widest possible people in ways that would bring people together and not constantly kind of stoke. But it goes back to, and I wrote the book because all of us in our workplaces, our neighborhoods, our churches, our businesses, our communities, we have a choice to make every time we get up to speak and to communicate, whether it's speaking in person, sending an email, posting something online, or in the neighborhood chat. We can decide whether we're going to just be combative and aggressive and try to slam people for our own sense of satisfaction, or whether we're going to try to reach out and understand people and actually try to find some common ground. And it's very satisfying to, you think you just really slap somebody down on social media or in the neighborhood chat,
right?
Achieve anything. So a big theme of the book is how to communicate what you, not asking anyone to abandon their fundamental beliefs or their fundamental values or what they believe. I'm challenging, and this book is an appeal for a more civil way of communicating with one another as fellow Americans.
So if we go a little further on that, and you were to craft a compelling message around the chaos in the DEI space, but you've got 3 sentences very quickly to sum up how you're feeling about that particular change that's happened in the government.
Yeah, I mean, if and this is a good for all of us, a lot of people go to town meetings or community meetings or workplace meetings. I guess I would just start with the things we share. I'd say, everybody, we're all Americans. We all love this country. We have maybe profoundly different views about how to build the best country we can be, but we all want a great country. We want a great country that takes care of its people and treats people with dignity and respect. And that's why I'm here, and that's what I want to work with you on. And that's the space I would go in. Again, but you start from a place of what you share and what you have in common, not what divides you. And I think a big part of the problem is that politicians are incentivized, oftentimes, particularly in the primary stage, to emphasize their differences with the other candidates. And to pit people against one another. And of course, cable news and pundits and social media is the worst because it thrives on conflict, it thrives on the kind of
information.
Yeah. So, but again, you ask
on a lighter note,
when someone gets up, you ask yourself, is this person trying to divide me from my neighbor, from my colleague, or trying to bring us together to achieve something positive?
There are so many questions. So let me for some of them that I skipped over, I do want you to know that I skipped over it because the answers are in the book. And it's not that I'm selling Terry's book, but he did just win a big award. So let's just stop for a minute because it just happened yesterday. So I do want to say congratulations. I reposted it on my LinkedIn today, but congratulations on winning the best marketing communication book of 2024.
Thank
Very
you.
impressive. So on a fun note, are you friends with President Obama and his family today? Do you still talk to them? We want to know a little bit more dirt. So send it over.
Right. But, he calls all the time. He wants to grab a beer. And I'm like, sir, we did it. We had 8 years together. We have to move on. No, I don't know. I see him maybe once a year, at little reunion events or, a reunion in Chicago or DC. So, once a year, quick conversation here or there, but we all sort of, all of us around him keep in great touch and very fortunate to sort of have a tight community. So while I don't necessarily speak to him that often, I'm in close touch with a lot of folks who do. And I'm very grateful for their, that we're all still, we all went through the fire together. We're still friends.
Did you assist in the speech after bin Laden was killed? And people are saying that was one of their most poignant speeches. Do you want to talk a minute about that?
Sure. I was not the lead speechwriter on that. That was my colleague, Ben Rhodes, who he wrote a beautiful book about his experiences at the White House. If you're interested, it's called The World as It Is. And he wrote about that in the book. And he was brought into it, I think, a week or two before it happened. So most of it at the very last minute. And he worked on it with President Obama. And a story that some of you may have heard about that the night before was that big annual correspondence dinner here in Washington where the president gets up and makes a lot of jokes. And one of the jokes in there was about bin Laden and making fun of him. And he crossed it out and didn't tell anybody why. and the next day we found out why. Didn't want to be in that space. So yeah,
Wow.
but
So I know Terry has graciously agreed to stay on. I wanted to share one of the things, and we're going to put we'll put our podcast in. Terry also introduced me to one of my favorite stories that sufficiently brings me to tears every time I listen to it, which is Alex's story. So we did get the honor to interview on our podcast. We had Alex and his mom come in. There's the podcast. Kai just brought it on. So if you haven't listened to it, because so many people are saying what we need today is your voice, your voice. You say, end every speech with hope and inspiration. He's graciously agreed to stay on for a few minutes afterwards, but I do want to stay on time for those of you who do need to leave. So this is the opportunity for you to end today with this, with what you practice, which is hope and inspiration. Terry, what would you end it on?
yeah, I have a chapter in the book called "The Only Way to End a Speech," and I really do believe that no matter what you're doing, a toast, a eulogy, a work presentation, comment at a town meeting, whatever, you got to end with hope. You got to leave your audience with a sense of hope and possibility, and there's a reason for that. Now, books and movies and plays don't always end with hope. I mean, we want them to, and many do, but we've all been in a movie, right, where the ends when you're like, oh, that's not the ending I wanted. Because a movie and a book and a play aren't necessarily asking you to do anything. And that's the big difference. When you get up in front of a group of people and take their busy time, it's because you're trying to do something, achieve something, get them to do something. I think the biggest measure of success of a speech or any presentation or eulogy, it's not what's said at the podium, it's what the audience does after the speech is over. And so you give these speeches, you want people to do something, think, act, believe differently. And so if you don't give them a sense that what you're talking about is possible, there's really no point in giving the speech in the first place. And so every single time you get up, I think you need to leave your audience with a sense of agency, that there's something they can do to make this world a better place, to deal with the problem that you're talking about. Even a eulogy, if you've lost someone, obviously they're gone, you can't bring them back. But there are things you can do to honor them and to carry forward their work. You can carry on their work, carry on their legacy. That's a way of keeping that hope and their spirit alive. So that's something, and I list out all the different ways that we can, keep hope. And if there's a lot going on in the world right now in our country, and if you go do something. I sort of don't have any patience anymore for anyone who comes up to me and says, "Oh my God, can you believe what just happened?" Every day you're going to get buffeted in life. Do something. Don't just be sad or be outraged. Do something. Volunteer, donate, give back to a cause. Do something to make the world a little bit better towards the right. We can't solve all problems, but we can help one person.
I love the challenge there. So again, for those of you who do need to drop off, I do know it's the top of the hour. We're going to keep going, but we're grateful that you took time from all over the world. And I'm glad that all of you have found Terry as amazing as I have. And you're going to find the book amazing. But we did get a question saying, okay, I'm getting the book today. But they still would love to know, and you have many books behind you. What's your shout out? What's your top go-to read that you love?
There are two books in particular that I've gone back to probably more than any other books in my life. One is Cosmos, the great, story about the origins of the universe and how we fit into things. And I've gone back to that so many times. And then my wife is Lebanese American, and one of the first gifts she ever gave me was Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, which I just think is one of the most beautiful, easy books you'll ever have. And I've turned to it many times in times of joy and times of pain. And between those two books, I sort of kind of reminds me what's important and how to stay centered and how to kind of see yourself and to keep, and obviously Cosmos the famous phrase about, we're all just a pale blue dot in the middle of a swirling galaxy. I know it's terrifying to some people. I actually find it comforting.
Me too. I totally. So
It
people
helps
want
me
to make
keep things
sure,
in
Terry,
perspective.
that you know that you have some fans in France that have joined, in Germany that have joined. We mentioned some of the other countries, so I'm trying to get all the shout outs to everyone. We do run a global business, so it's something that is really important to us that we understand that, I live near New York City. I mean, we're so centric here. If you ask me where I'm from, I say the city, as if there's only one city in the world.
Right.
But
Maybe folks can put their home if they're the U.S. We know, but if you're overseas somehow, put your country in the chat. That'd be cool to see.
yeah, and they are someone who is from Argentina, but right now living in Brussels. So we want to welcome them and invite them to the conversation as well. Um, I think you answered this one a little bit, but I want to make sure that I give you a chance to answer it again. If you are crafting a difficult message, as you talked about with the leaders about layoffs, can you go into just a teeny bit more detail about how you make sure that the leader could do that in the best way possible?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to do in that statement, whether it's written or spoken, is not to really go deep on all the details. They can get that in a briefing from HR or a press release or something like that. I think the most important thing a leader can do is to show empathy for what folks are going through. Again, don't talk about it as in all these euphemisms, rebalancing, restructuring, right sizing. I mean, it's all just nothing. This is word salad. Start with the fact that this is the last thing in the world I ever wanted to do. My we're more than colleagues. We're a team, and I value everybody. And I've tried every way I can to avoid this, but unfortunately, we do have to let some people go. We do have to lay people off. I mean, just say it. It's what it is, and that means that some of you hearing this today are going to be leaving the company, and I feel terrible about this. This is and we're gonna do everything we can as a company to help you transition and to help you find your next chapter. And so,
Yeah, I hear a lot of compassion in that.
yeah, so that to me is that again, because what you hear often is, oh my God, these corporate
The
robotic
jargon.
statements, and it's just terrible. And it's not. It's a terrible way to communicate to the people you're laying off, but it's also a terrible way to communicate to people who's staying. Because what a terrible message it sends to everyone who's there, because they've now watched how you treat the
Yeah.
people who you have to let go, and that's demoralizing. So empathy, compassion, humanity. Again, imagine if you were in the hallway running into someone who just found
What's
out
it
they're
feel
being
like?
laid
Yeah.
off. What
So
would you
here's
say
what
to that
I have
person?
not heard you answer before, and I have been lucky enough to hear you before, which I can't believe that I did not ask this myself. How did you balance your work and family while you were working on the job in the Oval Office?
Yeah, it was hard, and it was not so. And again, the word balance is always a hard one. It almost implies kind of a fairness and an equilibrium, and it wasn't. I think one of the things I've learned is there's rarely balance, but at different times in your life you can prioritize different things. It's not to say, but I was very lucky in two ways. One is I had colleagues. Little Our speechwriting team was mostly people in their early 30s or 20s. I was the old man at age 36 when I started. I was the only one who was married at the time with small children. They were 5 and 3, and the hours at the White House can be absolutely brutal. And I knew that if I was there from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night, I would have lasted maybe a few months, as some people did. What I said to my bosses was, "Look, I'm in this for the long haul. I believe in this. I'm willing to be here for every day for the next 8 years. But if I can leave every day at 6:30 or 7 and go have dinner with my family and help me be with my children and put my children to bed, then this is something I can do long term." And they agreed to that. And so now I never walked out of the office during a national security crisis, of course. So I didn't always get to do that. But in many cases, I was able to leave. And it was weird. I was it's hard to be the first one to walk out the door particularly in a high pressure environment. But yet I did that, and I was often walking past people uh, who were junior to me, who were making a lot less money than me. And that's the reality of life, right? But then I have dinner with my wife and kids and put the kids to bed and visit, and then be
Go
back
back on.
go back on for 5 or 6 hours. So I never missed a deadline. I told him I will never miss a deadline. I will always give you my best. I just need these 2 or 3
I think there
hours.
should be a commercial for my company, Terry, because that's everything that we say is we make it work. It
Yeah.
it fits differently.
And so is my colleagues, but also my wife, who obviously took on the burden and a disproportionate share of raising our children those years. And so it was not balanced in our house at all. It was something that we did, and the sacrifices that she made as well. And so yeah, it was only possible because of other people, and especially my wife Mary.
Yeah. So we didn't talk about this, but and I think it's interesting that this does come from one of the BLI world. What if you're doing a presentation, and there are people in the audience who don't believe the facts that you're presenting and might become a little angry or hostile?
Well, I mean, I have a whole chapter of the book called "Tell the Truth" because I think if I wrote this book maybe a decade ago, I probably wouldn't have devoted a whole chapter to that. But obviously, we are where we are as a society and as a world. I don't know. I don't spend too much time trying to think about how to convince people who don't want to be convinced. There's a great Neil deGrasse Tyson quote in the book. You can't convince, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's something effective. You can't convince people with logic and reason out of an argument they haven't reached through logic and reason. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is, you can't just throw facts and figures at people and expect that they're going to change their mind. I mean, I'd ask you, I don't think anyone's, I know what I believe about core fundamental issues, and probably no fact or figure is going to change my mind. So why would I figure it'd change somebody else's mind? I find that, make the best argument you can. Of course, be like Ashley All. Try to frame your argument as best you can around the values that are going to resonate with your audience. If they're more liberal, kind of make the best liberal argument you can for your case. If they're more conservative, make the best conservative argument you case. There is a conservative argument for dealing with climate change. If you find that your audience is skeptical, make that argument. You're not going to probably change all their minds, but that's the best we can do. That's what we can do. So, but again, if in the end, if someone is going to just respond to you with some obscure, argument and a falsehood from some obscure website, I mean, that's you're not going to convince that person.
Right. So this is interesting. It's a very long question, so I am paraphrasing this. So, do you work with Mayor Pete? How do you feel about they're a big fan? Have you helped him? Do you feel like he's got tremendous potential? And that person's going to buy the book right now and give it to their niece in California. So I'm giving her some love over here.
Oh,
how are you feeling about Mayor Pete?
Thank you for that. One of my dreams was that parents and adults will get this book for their children and the young people in their lives, because this is a skill that, as I said, we all need to learn this. And why not learn it when you're in your teens, in your 20s, how to be a great communicator and not have to develop bad habits. So I'm thrilled that thank you for doing that. I'm thrilled that so many adults are giving this book to young people and their children. Yeah, no, I've never worked with or written for Pete Buttigieg. I've had friends, fellow speechwriters who have, and yeah, no, he's one of the great communicators in the Democratic Party. I love the fact that he goes on Fox News, not to slam and demean people, but to make the best case he can make in a way that he feels will, again, great example of, number one, he shows up. Number two, he's respectful. Number three, he tries to make the best argument he can in a way that he thinks will resonate with the viewers of that network. And that's important. And I think that's what we all have to do.
A good one to follow. From one of the BLI family that's in Egypt, they would like to know, do you share the Obama speech in Cairo University in 2009? And it contains some Arabic words.
Yeah, I love, that's one of my favorite speeches. I was not the lead speechwriter on it. I helped out a little bit with it, but I was not the lead speechwriter. Like I said, I was a team of, as a team, we wrote more than 30,000. That's one of my favorite speeches. I know Obama's critics like to really, especially in later years, like, well, look how that turned out. To me, that speech was about a leader standing up between, not between, but in trying to speak at once to two many communities and to try to help different communities see their humanity in each other. And so he talked to Arab and Muslims about the Jewish experience and the Israeli experience. He talked to Jewish and Israelis and Americans about the Muslim experience, the Arab experience. To me, it's a great example of someone trying to bridge divides and to find the common humanity in one another. And to then people forget, the back half of the speech was, here are, 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it was, ways that I think maybe we can work together to make life better for our people. And it was things like healthcare and food and education, things that shouldn't be divisive, shouldn't be, polarizing. And so again, ultimately, another thing that always drove me crazy at the end of his administration, Mr. President, what are your biggest regrets? Do you regret the fact that you didn't unite America? I'm like, as if it's one person's job to unite 300 million people. That your people, when everyday cable news is spewing filth, every day all the other politicians are stoking every division and divide. It is not up to one person to bring a country together. It's up to all of us. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. How can we communicate in a way that brings people together? That's how you do it. We can't look to our leaders to bring us together if we're not willing to do it ourselves.
So I think it's a testament. Almost everybody stayed on the whole time. I want to end it with, I have incredible gratitude towards you, Terry, because as a small business owner, hope becomes our biggest thing, right? Entrepreneurs build dreams that don't really make sense to anybody except for themselves, right? And when the world does work, where you send a LinkedIn message, really asking for some time for someone like you, you're getting a lot of love and hearts. It's the way that you restore our faith in hope and humanity. So there are a lot of questions we didn't get to. We did the best we could to capture the essence of today. You're going to get to know him much better through the book, because he really is a very personal read. And I was sharing with Terry, my 89-year-old mother, who unfortunately couldn't be here, was saying that it was really a fun read. And I think that's a real compliment. She's a voracious reader, but it is a very quick read. So it's not just reading the book and buying the book and supporting the book, but really following you on LinkedIn and continuing to hear your messages. I hope you know how grateful we are to you.
Well, thank you so much. I thank you again for reaching out, for creating this space where we can have conversations like this and connect with one another. I'm so grateful. And I appreciate that you, I'm so glad you picked up on it. My hope was that people pick up this book because, hey, they have a eulogy or a toast or a presentation at work to give and they want to be better at it. But then through that, realize there's some bigger themes at play here when we get up, and we have some real, every time we do this, we have an opportunity to connect with one another in deep and meaningful ways. And that's one of the things I hope people get out of the book. So thank you so much for this.
It's so cool because everyone's writing, thank you, Terry. And that's a nice thing that they feel that comfortable with you, to be like, oh, he's in the living room. It's Terry. He just happens to be this incredibly award-winning, amazing person. But you've done that, and you talk a lot about that in the book. So I love when the worlds collide, when the people are what they write.
Oh, thank you.
That is really amazing. So we will send you the chat because you definitely got so much love in it. And they're describing you as totally authentic. And I think that is an incredible way to end it. So thank you, Terry, for taking time out today. And thank you guys for helping me host it and being here from all over the world. An incredible session that we will post the recording as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. See you on LinkedIn.
See you on LinkedIn. Bye.
This has been a production of Balancing Life's Issues with your hosts, Kai Sorensen and Wendy Wollner. Produced by me, Kai. Rate, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen so you can get brand new episodes as they drop. Got an idea for the show? Email me, kai@balancinglifesissues.com. Anything to add, Miles?